Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for the three-time Ironman World Champion, Mr. Craig Alexander. Nice crowd, right?
Great crowd. Those lights are bright.
I know, huh? I love that. So you're good?
I'm very, very good.
So take me back, Croy. What were your sports early on?
Like most kids growing up in Australia, I tried everything. My main sport was soccer, football. I played from the age of 5 until I was 20. But I played some tennis, some golf, a little bit of water polo in high school. So yeah, just like most young Aussie kids, we have an outdoor lifestyle and a very sporting culture. So I tried my hand at everything that was going and everything that was on offer.
And when did you hear about triathlon and decide you wanted to try it?
Well, I wanted to be a professional soccer player in the English Premier League, but I heard about triathlon very early on. The Hawaiian Ironman was on television every year, and we had a couple of great Australian triathletes at the time, Greg Walsh and McKeely Jones, and they were winning big races all over the world, and they were getting a lot of media coverage back home, so it wasn't unusual to pick up the newspaper and read about Greg and McKeely or see a race like Chicago or St. Croix on television. So I was very interested in the sport, and, you know, to be honest, I always had an interest in multidiscipline events. At the Olympics, I used to love the decathlon. I loved Daley Thompson, the great decathlete from the UK. I thought it was interesting how an athlete could be world-class in more than one event, and even when some of those events are not complementary to each other. So I used to love to watch the decathlon, and I used to love to watch the triathlon. So I'd seen the sport for a long time before I ever decided to do one, but it was 1994. I was still at university, at college, studying. My soccer days had come to an end the year before, and a fellow Australian, Greg Walsh, won here, and he was the first non-American to take the title, and it was massive, massive news back home. And I just got infatuated with Greg. I started reading his stats, his height, his weight, and everything about him. I thought it was amazing that a guy who was 5'4" and so little was an Ironman. You know, you think of Ironman, you think of
Big, strong
guy, and you know, Greg was from in Sydney, where I was from, and yeah, that was the catalyst really that led me to give the sport a real go.
And was the idea early on when you heard the triathlon was going to be in the Olympics for the first time in 2000? Did that become a goal?
You know, the goal was just to immerse myself in the sport. From the beginning, you know, I was never an outwardly confident person, but I thought I was well suited to the sport. All through high school, I'd done well at cross country and track. Usually on the track, it was the shorter events, though, like the 200 and the 400 that I would progress through. But because it got I think, included in the games about the time that I started, and obviously the next games on the ticket were in Sydney. So, yeah, the sport was gaining massive momentum back home. But, you know, I was still a full-time uni student with a part-time job, and if there was a pecking order in our sport, we had Greg, we had Brad Bevan, we had Miles Stewart. We had a lot of great athletes who had come through the junior ranks, come through the federation, had won major races, multiple world champions. And so I, at that point, wasn't thinking Olympics. I was just thinking I wanted to be part of this great sport. And, you know, I knew I was willing to train hard. I didn't know much. I was buying triathlon magazines, and it was long before social media. I was buying triathlon magazines and reading, you know, they would put sessions in, bike trainer sessions and run sessions. Triathlete magazine, who are here tonight, they would run features on different well-known athletes, and they would give their session of the week, and I would just do those sessions, and I just immersed myself in the sport and loved the sport. And so I wasn't thinking Olympics. I was thinking I want to be better, and I felt I could be a professional. I'm not sure why. Having no real background in endurance sports, I just felt after my dreams of being a soccer professional died, I wanted to be a professional athlete.
And when did you do a race that made you believe that you could be not just a professional, but a good professional?
I couldn't pinpoint a race. I think my improvement was at times rapid, at other times more steady, and at other times non-existent. And I think everyone here who knows about endurance sports knows there's no shortcuts. You've got to log the hours, do the work. I think for me it was more other people's belief in me. I didn't have a lot of self-confidence in terms of, I felt I could be a professional athlete, but I didn't think I could come here and win. And I wasn't even thinking, I guess, that far afield. But I think when you're a younger athlete and someone you look up to, for instance, takes you aside or takes you under their wing and they have faith in you, that gave me a lot of confidence. And I had that with Greg and McKeely. For some reason, they became mentors of mine and great friends. And I remember on a number of occasions, 1997, I'd been in the sport 2.5 years, and I got called into the national team training camp with a lot of the guys I was reading about in those magazines, the guys and girls who were winning World Cups, who were the big favourites to make the Australian team for the Olympic Games in Sydney. And yeah, Greg just took me under his wing. I remember doing a run session with him one day, and the coach at the time was... he loved to breed this competitive environment, and he made no apologies for it. It was very competitive, and he would structure the swim workouts and the run workouts, particularly the track workouts, where it became like a race, and it was last man standing a lot of the time. And a lot of the sessions we did, I would end up with Greg on the track. We would just be locking horns, and I remember one day I was still at university full time, and I had to leave the camp early because I had to go back to university. And we were cooling down, and Greg said to me, there's only a handful of triathletes in the world who could have finished that session, and 2 of them are right here. And I thought, there's only he and I right here. Who's he talking about? And, not wanting to make light of it, it's when you're young, I guess I didn't believe I could win world titles. I just wanted to get better, and I could see myself getting better. But for me, the great impact, or the greater impact, came from the belief that I felt and experienced from I guess, mentors I had like Greg and McKeely.
Now, there was a point where, when you're talking about training with the team, wasn't there a point where you thought you might be chosen to be part of, potentially identified to be an Olympian?
Yeah, no, well, after the Olympics were on in Sydney, I'd graduated with my degree. So I'm a qualified physical therapist. If anyone's got any aches and pains before Saturday, I'm sure we can sort you out.
Right there. Your tongue hurts? Yeah, right there.
I can't work on your tongue, mate.
Sorry. Sorry, mate. You're off the back on that one.
Yeah.
You're on your own.
But I went in to watch the game. The games in Sydney were right near where Neri and I lived, where we lived in Sydney. And we went in to watch with another athlete, Chris Hill, who probably should have made that Olympic Games team. He'd been ranked number 1 in the world. He didn't make the team. Anyway, we went in to watch. We had a lot of friends racing, and a friend of ours won it. Came from nowhere, really, Simon Whitfield, a guy I'd started in the sport with and trained with a lot, and still actually one of my fondest triathlon memories, standing with Neri in the Domain in Sydney, and we just couldn't believe Simon was going to win. We could believe it. I knew how talented he was, but to do it, Neri and I were jumping around, and he was Canadian and we were Australian, so of course we wanted an Aussie to win, but the next best thing was a really great mate. And yeah, so after watching the games in Sydney, that became my goal. I wanted to go to Athens, and yeah, the national coach said, "You're in the frame. What we want you to do is make the World Championship team," which was in Edmonton in 2001, which I did. I came second at the national championships and made the team. But the big stepping stone was the Commonwealth Games, which were in Manchester in England in 2002, and I got on the squad of 6. I had to pick 3, but unfortunately I got sick. I got the chicken pox.
Chicken pox, I remember that.
Yeah, so I missed the final selection races and missed the team, and I had to come up with something to do. First of all, I had to get healthy, and it was a long rehabilitation. It's quite a nasty virus when you're an adult. But I came to the US. I had to find something to do. By definition, as a professional athlete, it's your profession. And the national coach couldn't guarantee me World Cup starts, which was fair enough. He had a job preparing the national team for the World Championships that year in the Commonwealth Games. So all roads for me led to the US, led to San Diego, and that's where Neri and I landed in about May or June of 2002.
And what people don't realize is there really weren't a lot of races in Australia at that point. Back then, it was L.A., Chicago, New York, Minnesota. There was a great circuit in the U.S. But for a kid from Australia to come here, it's not like it's a long flight. It's a big commitment because it's not like you're going to come here for a week. You've got to basically come here for a big chunk of the year for that summer. When you got here, and I know there was some times with Luke McKenzie, another Aussie, you guys were basically sharing an apartment, right, in Encinitas, California, living on air mattresses, just trying to live it off prize money.
Absolutely, and I think it's, it's part of your development as an athlete, and they're fond memories now. But yeah, absolutely, we came to I mean, as an athlete from Australia in any sport, you have to spend a lot of time overseas. The majority of sports, the main circuits or series are in the Northern Hemisphere, whether it be North America or Europe. So I'd done a few seasons in Europe, pretty much while I was still at university. But in 2002, we arrived in San Diego. It was a foreign country. We did know some people there, though, obviously. So we had that in our favour. But it was tough times because once you move away from the National Federation, you're not getting funding anymore. And, I was 28 years of age at the time. We had a mortgage back home, so I felt some pressure to perform and make money. But yeah, you're going to a foreign country. We rented an apartment. The apartment you're referring to is in 2003. It was in Carlsbad, California, North County, San Diego, and our apartment it felt like the Amtrak was running right through our lounge room. I mean, you looked at our lounge room window and the Amtrak was right there. You could see what they were serving for morning tea. And we rented this place, which cost a small fortune. A few of us went in together, and it was unfurnished, which we didn't know. So then we just went down to Target and bought what we needed, but we all slept on air mattresses, which was a lot of fun, sort of.
What was one of the races that you won that sort of turned things around for you?
I think every race you win or lose, you learn something from. I guess a race that I won that turned things around.
Lifetime?
Lifetime was a big one, I think, for a number of reasons. At the time, it was the highest prize purse in the history of our sport. So,
was it 200 and?
It was $200,000 US dollars. So, yeah. And at the time in Australia, I think the exchange rate was about 66 cents to the US dollar. So that's a fairly favourable exchange when you come from Australia.
Yeah.
That was a nice currency transaction for us. But I think more so than the money, it was the validation as an athlete. I think as an athlete, you do need certain events or mentors or situations throughout your career that are like triggers. And for me, that was one of them, because when I moved away from the ITU racing in 2002, and I never really actually got into it. I probably only did 10 or 12 World Cups in my whole career. I was still doing a lot of short course racing, those races that you mentioned, but you're outside the federation. And, I think as an athlete, particularly as a competitive person, I just really wanted to see how I was progressing and how I stacked up against the best in the world. And a lot of the best in the world were racing the ITU races, but they would come to the US for a couple of races a year, and one of them was that Lifetime Fitness race that you mentioned. So to race the guys, I mean, in 2005, when we raced in Lifetime, the 3 Olympic medalists from the year before were there. 2 Olympic medalists from Sydney were there, and the ITU World Champions, the guys dominating. And I think any athlete will tell you it's that sort of validation when you perform well on that stage. It was a live race on television against that competition. I think it is an important stepping stone and progression in your career from not only the physical standpoint, but I think more so mentally, and just believing that you're on the right trajectory.
So, and that race put you in a position where Neri and Lucy, was Lucy around yet or close?
Lucy was 8 weeks old, yes, when I won that race.
It allowed you to bring the family to the States and have that support.
They were in this. So Neri and I decided from very early on that we would travel together. I didn't want to be away. She was my foundation. She was my rock. She did a lot of the stuff behind the scenes, the cleaning, the cooking, the logistics of organising a professional career. And she was just my soulmate, my best mate. I think when you're a long way from home, you need that emotional support as much as any physical support. So she came to the US in 2002 when I made the trip the first time, 2003. Each year, actually. In 2005, we actually came to the US a little late because we were having Lucy. Lucy was born on the 4th of May. When she was old enough to travel, I think she was 4 or 5 weeks old, we came to Boulder, and I did a 4 or 5 week block and went to Minnesota. So Neri, the race wasn't actually live on television. It was delayed 2 hours. I was in the drug testing after the race, and I'd left my mobile phone back in the hotel room, and I was dying to tell her that I'd won. And I finally was able to borrow a mobile phone and ring her, and she's like, "Oh, I'm watching you. You're just about to win." And I'm like, "I did win. I'll save you the suspense. I won." And I remember telling her to call her dad and tell him. And she's like, "It's the middle of the night back home." I'm like, "You got to call him." At our wedding in 1998, in his speech, January 1999, his speech, he said, "I just don't know how this triathlete's going to take care of my daughter. I don't know how this triathlete's going to support my daughter." So I said, "Get on the phone, let's wake your old man up and let him know we're doing all right."
I love that. That is great. And speaking of doing all right, when all of a sudden the Ironman 70.3 starts, and that is perfect for you. You win a 70.3 Worlds, and then you come to Kona for the first time. You went to New Zealand, I think, to do an Ironman to get a feel for it. But your first really competitive one was when you came to Kona in 2007, right?
Absolutely. And it's funny, because, when I think back, there was no real plan other than I knew I would get to Kona. But I think I'd found, a scene in the US that I really enjoyed. I had great sponsors. I was able to get some good sponsors, and I just really enjoyed the racing, but I was still doing predominantly Olympic distance races,
right?
Mainly non-drafting. And there were 70.3s, as we used to call them, half Ironmans. Not as many as there are now. So you had races like St. Croix, and there's probably Wildflower.
Yeah.
So there was 3 or 4, and they were very prestigious, but there was no circuit like there is now, and there certainly wasn't a recognised world championship.
No.
But I really loved the distance. I hadn't lost a 70.3 race for 3 or 4 years, but then they actually, put the series together, which culminated with a world championship, and it was announced that if you won, you would qualify for Kona. So that became my big goal for 2006, the inaugural 70.3 world championships, and I was lucky enough to win, and obviously took my spot that got me to here in 2007. So I was a very old rookie. I was 34 when I fronted up on the island the first time. But I felt I was well equipped because I'd been a full-time professional for 13 or 14 years in the US, cutting my teeth against great athletes.
Yeah.
And so I finally got here. But I didn't feel I had the traditional, everyone would tell you you need to do an apprenticeship here. It's going to take 4 or 5 years. And, at 34, I felt I didn't have that long.
Right.
I really had to hit the ground running. And again, I was just lucky I happened to be in Boulder. And who should be on pool deck every day other than Dave Scott, our esteemed other guest from this evening. And yeah, he and I had formed a friendship over the years that we'd been going to Boulder since 2005. And I remember I saw Dave, and it was he won't remember, but I remember the conversation clearly. It was April 2007. We had just arrived in Colorado from Sydney. Dave was holding court as he does on the pool deck, 50% coaching, 50% preaching. He's very famous for his monologues. I'm just going to get in early, Dave, get a couple of shots across the bow here. Anyway, I actually had done the session. We got out and he was off. He had to catch a plane somewhere. And I said, I'd love to catch up with you and rack your brain about Ironman and, get some tips. He said, "Oh, absolutely, anytime. I'm actually a bit pressed today. I've got to get out to the airport." And I said, "Oh, okay, we've got plenty of time. We've got until October." And he said, "Oh, you're doing it this year?" He said, "Meet me in the lobby. We'll have a coffee. You haven't got a second to waste." And it was a joke, but it was Dave's way of, putting me on high alert of the work that I had ahead of me. And he became one of my great mentors because through all his joking, he could tell me not always what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear. And because we had such a great friendship, his message always landed well. So we had the little meeting, and I came out a few months later and was able to get second, which qualified me for the following year.
And the following year, you come back and you win your first Ironman World Championship title. What was that feeling like, coming down Lee Drive and just knowing that you were going to win the most important title on the planet?
It's hard to explain. It's hard to put into words or articulate. I wish I could, and I've tried 100 times, but In 2006, I was actually part of a team called Try to Buy, and I was lucky enough to get invited out here and do a training camp with Lisa Bentley, who was also part of the team and who went on to get third in Kona that year. And I felt part of my fast-tracking my experience was I needed to train out here a lot. So I got to know every inch of the course very well, and I used to practice running down a Leahy Drive. I'm embarrassed to say it, but it's true. I used to run down there when Lisa wasn't watching and visualise that I was somewhere up towards the front of the race and compare what it used to look like on television with what it was like in real life. And yeah, it was one of the strategies I used my whole career was visualization. So if I didn't have experience in a race, or I could almost will myself or pretend I was there and practice mentally. And so then when I finally did get there, it wasn't a shock or a surprise. But yeah, I can't explain what 08 was like. It was incredible. To come here and go second and then first was everything I'd hoped for, because by that stage I was 35, and I knew I had limited years here, so I needed to maximise every single year. And I was just very happy to see my wife at the finish line, and all the people who had helped me, and a lot of them were in and around the race. Dave is a past champion; he was here. Welshie was here, McKeely, and it's a very humbling experience actually to be amongst that company and join that company, become a winner and a world champion. So yeah, it was one of the fondest professional memories I have in my life actually from the sport, and something I'll never forget. And even now, just being in Kona and walking down, Neri and I, we parked yesterday and we're walking down, have a swim under the banyan tree and down there, and it brings back so many memories, and the smells and everything. It's just it's hard to explain, but it's very special.
I remember we were doing an interview, and you were saying that the next morning after you had won, that Lucy comes, Lucy comes and jumps on you, and what she said.
Yes, so she's 08, so she's 3, and yeah, she's just grown up around the sport, obviously. So yeah, she came running it, and I mean, I guess the backstory is, I used to come out here, and it was just Neri, Lucy, and I. It was the 3 of us, and when I would do longer run sessions or brick sessions, Neri would run SAG for me. And we were just talking the other day. Neri's got photos of Lucy that year 3 running through the energy lab in flip-flops, handing me drinks as I'm doing my runs off the bike. And so it was a family affair. And yeah, she came in and said, "Oh, Mummy and I are so proud of you. You did that big, long race all by yourself." And she's got plenty of sass, that girl. Still to this day, she's 13.
And she's running.
She's a good little athlete, yeah.
Love that. So you follow that up, become one of the few guys to win 2 years in a row. And then in 2010, Chris McCormick and Timo Brock and Faris El-Sultan, those guys got together and attacked on the bike. You had a formula for winning, and they pretty much disrupted it. And between Kauai High, Javi, and Kauai High, they attacked in the crosswinds and got like 8 minutes. And then that was the whole idea, is the feeling was we need to work together to get rid of Crowie. And to me, what really marks a champion is when you have to change, right? And after 2010, when you got 4th, you went back and you put your bike in the wind tunnel, realized maybe I need a different bike, and you got yourself an aero helmet for the first time. Take me through the thought process of, okay, I've been doing this sport a long time. I've won 2 years in a row, but obviously I have to do something different.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I love it. It's one of the most rewarding times of my career, although it was very stressful at the time. But I think when you have a certain formula or recipe and it yields a lot of success, it can be hard to change, and it's a risk-reward thing. And the guys, they got together and they changed the race up that following year. So I'd always been of the mentality that if I did the right sort of work, I could get the best performance out of myself. I didn't put as much thought or, I guess, credence into equipment and everything else. I had a little bit of an old school mentality, which had served me well. But I wasn't ignorant to the way the sport was changing either. In 2009, a lot of the specific time trial bikes came into effect with the speed concept with Trek and the Shiv, the Scott Plasma. And up until that point, we had I guess, time trial bikes, but they were more like I guess, hybrid road bikes.
Right.
And we'd put aero bars on the front, but it was more a road geometry. And I just thought I could outwork everybody else and out-tough them on race day, and it had served me well. And I guess it was a little bit naive. And, you know, as in sport, it's kind of, you can liken it to a game of tennis. You know, you hit a great shot over the net and your competitors hit one back. And if they hit a winner, then you have to come up with a different strategy on the next point. So, yeah, we went away, and with my manager, Franco, we reevaluated everything. And we went in the wind tunnel, and it was eye-opening. And we had a fair idea. And as I said, I wasn't ignorant to the changes that were taking place, but we'd entered into a relationship with a company, and certain things were promised that weren't delivered. And I had a decision to make after seeing the wind tunnel data, and I'd never worn like a really well-fitted suit or even an aero helmet the first 4 years I raced here.
Yeah.
But in 2011, I thought I'm maximising everything, right up to what tyre I'm gluing on the bike, drink bottle placement, everything. And it was an education being in the wind tunnel, actually. And I was just lucky again that I had really good people around me. It's probably the one thing that I've done consistently well throughout my career, is surround myself with the best people. And if we didn't know something, we outsourced and we found out what we needed to know. But it became pretty obvious I needed an overhaul in equipment, position on the bike, but it meant making some awkward and uncomfortable decisions, and led to some legal action, possibly getting sued. So that was stressful because we're on the phone to lawyers. I felt I was on the phone to lawyers more than I was training, but we were right. I hadn't done anything wrong. I knew what was promised and what had been negotiated, and anyway, I don't want to bore you with the details other than it was quite stressful, but I said to Neri, this is the situation. I need this new equipment. I want to use it. I may only have one or two really good Konas left in me, but there could be consequences financially and legally and otherwise. And Neri looked at the information and did what she always did, which was support me 100% and said, let's go for it. You're in the right. Let's go for it. So that's what we did.
And you took about 15 minutes off of your cycling time from the year before. And you basically dictated the pace on the bike. You were the guy up at the front. And then you get off the bike and you break the Ironman record a month after winning 7.3 Worlds, becoming one of the few people to win 70.3 Worlds and Ironman World Championship, plus breaking the course record. So obviously everything, all the changes you made worked perfectly.
Yeah, they did. And it was just so rewarding because my MO had always been to maximize everything, but I somehow got into this rut of just wanting to work hard. And it was so rewarding because I felt that year we did everything really well. And I had so much good help around me. And it was nice to have a great team. And that's what I remember about winning that year. The team were all there and we celebrated afterwards. It was just a wonderful feeling. But again, I was lucky I had smart people who knew the right things and were right on top of all the changes that were taking place at the time. And I got on the wave. And yeah, it was nice to ride that way. I'd always ridden very conservatively here, and because that's what I'd watched Dave and Mark do.
Right.
Well, they didn't ride conservatively, but they rode in a way that they could run 240, and that's what they did year in, year out. So I felt that's got to be the blueprint. It's different to other races because of the climate, because of the competition. You know, in ITU racing, the best race each other all the time, or 4 or 5 times a year, but in Ironman racing, really,
it's here.
You get together once or twice a year, absolutely. So... yeah, it was a very rewarding year. It was 13 minutes actually on the bike. And when we were in the wind tunnel, the technician who, obviously they sign NDAs because they work with all the companies, they can't disclose secrets, but he said it would be roughly about that time. And we took another guy in who was a bike mechanic but also had a PhD in some sort of mathematics, which is an unusual mix of professions. But he said, I said, mate, I need a number. And he was telling me pounds per square inch, coefficient. I said, I need a number, 112 miles, prevailing wind conditions in Kona. How much is bike A quicker than bike B? And he said 12 or 13 minutes. And he was spot on. It was 13 minutes for actually a lower power output. And that doesn't tell the whole story because I guess a normalized power at the end of the race is how you... It's the one number at the end. It doesn't tell the story of how you've spent that power. But yeah, it was a lower power output for a much better end result. And Yeah, I was second off the bike that year.
Love it. How about a round of applause for Mr. Craig Alexander? Crowy, thank you, bud.